I run up and attack. I shoot it with my bow. I guess I run up and swing at it. I attack it! I poke it twice. Narrative combat should not just be flavor text for spells and abilities. It should fuel decisions and give each player a springboard to jump off of on their turn. But it's kind of tricky to actually do in-game. Hopefully, by the end of this video, you'll have a better grasp of how to draw your players into the action and into your combat. Why bother narrating combat at all? It can be tempting, so very tempting sometimes, to just push combat along as fast as possible. Some video games even lean into this experience to make combat as fast as possible. Diablo 3 comes to mind. It has an instant, visceral kind of combat mechanic where your character can fight through thousands, swaths of enemies in just a couple of minutes, and the abilities that they use take one button press and happen instantaneously. Having logged 500 hours into Diablo, probably more at this point, I can say that your game will still be fun if that's the route that you go, but you do have other options. A much less popular and much less successful game is actually Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma gives a wildly different experience in this regard. Players can dodge and dive from enemies, use special abilities and spells. Small enemies can prove difficult in a large enough group. Healing is difficult to cast and maintain, and your characters and their followers can climb onto larger monsters to deal more devastating damage, with the potential of potentially falling off to their death. Without a grid and without the use of incredibly interesting miniatures and terrains, using a dynamic style of narration like in Dragon's Dogma may lead to a more interesting and invested experience all around from your players and maybe even yourself. There are a few hard rules for this sort of thing, but I have a great deal of practical experience in at least attempting to narrate combat for a group of 4 to 10 players, so hopefully some of these ideas can help aim you in a more interesting direction for your own game. I'd break it into 4 different rules. Each one of the rules I find plays a key part in keeping combat interesting in my own games. Hopefully it'll help you too. Rule 1. Don't shut down your players. If your player says, "I'd like for my character to grab onto the rope, hang upside down from their feet, and shoot the crossbow into the troll," you should 100% of the time say, "Give it a shot." Why? Because mechanically the player's not asking for anything out of the ordinary. Does it really change the tactics that they're using if they're hanging upside down from the rope? They're flavoring their attack in a strange way, yes, but they're not asking to do bonus upside down damage. They're not trying to get a mechanical advantage leveraged through how they describe their attack. I've known many DMs who would say, the bolt will fall out of your crossbow, you can't do it. Or, you can try but roll -5 and disadvantage because you're hanging upside down from a freaking ladder. These DMs are taxing their players for a completely decorative narration choice, and it really doesn't bring anything. What you're going to do is you're going to incentivize your players to say, "I shoot it twice." No flavor, no description, no risk, no reward, no incredible feat. They're instead going to generalize their turn so they don't incur a penalty. Do not get me wrong, if your player is constantly trying to eke out a mechanical advantage for seemingly arbitrary positioning or descriptions, then you need to keep that player in check until they reel it back in to align with what you expect in your game. If they try to say, "Since I'm above them and I hit, it should just be a critical hit, right? Because I can only hit them in the head." You gotta nip that in the bud. That kind of thinking will lead to a bunch of headaches down the road if you cave into their every whim in that regard, so be very cautious. You don't want them invoking the, "but I'm above them," every single time they fight an enemy to undercut the mechanics of your game. Unless you want your entire party spider climbing across the ceiling, raining down arrows, dealing instant critical damage on everything that they fight. If that's what you want, then, live your truth, live your dreams. Rule 2, back up one turn. It's a great practice to roll backwards one turn when you're describing what happens in combat, and then add your own actions on top of it. It kind of sets up for a better flow for combat. It gives everyone an understanding of positioning and what's happening relative to what they're doing as well. An example: Kaylin just jumped down off the balcony and onto the back of the carriage and is hanging on, so I'm gonna spur my horse around and try to get him off of the carriage before he falls. Okay, roll me an animal handling check. The next player would then say, so Jaquez spurs his horse up to the carriage and he starts pulling at Kaylin, but there's still a guy whipping the carriage's horse? I want to try and kill that guy so that he drops the reins. Maybe that'll slow down the carriage or make it veer off course or something. By urging your players to summarize the previous turn and summarizing your own turns when it's your time to shine, you'll see a drastic improvement in overall understanding of the battlefield and their position in it. Ensure your players that you're on their side by enabling them without adding punishing downsides to accomplish the task. Rule 3, let them shine in their own way. If your rogue has built themselves up to trip and disarm people, give them opponents and opportunities to trip and disarm. The wizard needs access to spellbooks and tomes as well as magical effects on the battlefield to try and manipulate. Each character has a skill set that can be applied in interesting and different ways. All you need to do is to follow their own narrative desires to keep them engaged and keep combat moving forward. Part of the reason this can be so difficult for players to do consistently every combat is because you're the one who's looking through the peephole and seeing the world on the other side. You have to convey that information back to your players before they know what they can actually do, what it's within reason for them to accomplish. An example: this fighter is hanging onto the back of this burning carriage. You could just let them kind of flounder and say, oh, it's full of smoke and it's really heavy and all this. Or you could give them enough information so that they know they have the option to break the wheel and cause the carriage to veer off course. They could cut the reins free from underneath the carriage. They could leap to safety. They could smash through the wall of the carriage, grab the driver, and pull them inside, since the carriage is usually made of flimsy wood. These options are not going to appear just randomly in your player's mind unless they're a very veteran player who's played with you for a long time. You can shortcut this and start your players in on this sort of thing immediately by giving them enough information to work on. It can prompt them to do things outside of the box that otherwise they may never have thought to do. A lot of DMs, MCs, keepers, rulers, etc. have this strange rule of don't make them do anything. But your players are relying on you to give them enough information to make a decision. Rule 4, keep things evolving. The sad truth is, you will have players who do not pay attention. It's just a thing that's going to happen. That player will grow complacent, they'll grow confused, they'll not really be sure what's supposed to be happening in the fiction or at the table in that moment after about 20 minutes of whatever you're doing. As my DMing career has moved forward, I've cared less and less about the micro details of each character's action and more about them just doing something cool. One way to coax your players to pay more attention, or coax your players who pay less attention to invest in a scene, is by making them do cool things, by pushing the narrative focus of the engagement onto their character. Let's say that they were sent to some castle to meet a landlord, maybe just for a conversation or a dinner party. And then suddenly the guards open fire on them. People swarm out of the breaching gate and rush forward to attack everybody. Everything's happening all at once. Arrows are raining down. The party is in disarray. And the Paladin's player, a little bored and confused, says, "I thought we were supposed to be meeting him here to talk?" Before the rest of your players literally tear them apart with their teeth, use that in-game. Bring it back into the game and back into the scene. Make the game answer those questions and evolve. Creed, you see the arrows aren't random. They're fluttering over the heads of some of your comrades and right at your ward, Nori. She ducks behind you and says, "Creed, they're trying to kill me. I knew that Lord..." And an arrow sinks into her side. What do you do? It's not enough to just answer the question and give them the synopsis of what they should already know, and then go down the initiative track until something cool happens. You need to thrust the urgency upon the player who is least invested. Be sure they know what's happening enough to react to it, but try to have the game reach out and pull them. Don't just sit around waiting for them to get the memo or to climb on board and get involved in the scene. You need to actively pursue their investment, their interests. Most of the time, you'll get it. You'll get that investment instead of, I wait for someone to hack out with my sword, or I run forward. You'll get, where can I drag Nori? Can I protect her with my shield? I have a lot of AC. Can we get far enough away that the arrows can't reach us? If I heal her, can she run for cover while I draw their fire? Or can someone cast Fog Cloud so that I can heal Nori without getting shot to death? That's the kind of thinking you want in the game and in the moment in your encounters. Otherwise, your players turn into damage numbers, just vomiting out attack rolls turn after turn, instead of living, breathing people and characters in your game. The TLDR that you can send to your players and your DM. Describe the turn before yours, then do your own actions. Tell where you are and what you want to do, not what you want to roll. Go into detail of what that looks like, smells like, feels like. Evolve the combat to pull in aloof players. Give each player options using the environment and the world. And don't punish flavor descriptions with difficult mechanics. Over-rewarding their out-of-the-box thinking is even worse, but if you don't let them describe their own actions, they will just tell you a damage number. Hopefully, some of these can be helpful in your next combat encounter, and you can spice things up using what I've laid here before you. Let your PCs shine in awesome ways, and your NPCs can one-up in their own way. It should always be a match of who can be cooler and who can be more interesting on their turn, instead of who can deal the most damage, who can give you the highest number. You want them to do things outside of just the math on this one. And I think that if you can start enticing them to do that, you'll find a whole new world open before you on stuff that you can do in your combat encounters. Bye!